Welcome to the next video in our series. This video is titled Strategies for Engaging Participants. In this video, we are going to talk about some tools and techniques that session presenters can use to get your participants up and moving, engaging with the session content, engaging with each other, and enjoying their learning experience.
One way of engaging your participants in your sessions is through stories. Embedding one or more foundational stories into your presentation can really greatly enhance a PD session for many reasons. First off, stories are just kind of how the human brain processes information and makes sense of the world. Okay? Whenever events happen in our daily life, we naturally attribute a cause and an effect, a motivation, an emotion to those events, kind of like a story. Have you ever heard people talk about their narrative or their truth? These are the stories they tell themselves about that idea or an event. And it's just kind of how people think. So including relevant stories in your presentations can really help people understand and make sense of your session content and ideas. Stories also have emotional elements. And when presenters share a story openly, especially early on in the presentation, it can really help to make an emotional connection with the audience as opposed to just sharing information, right? We all connect emotionally with stories every day, and it's a really great way to really connect and engage with your session participants. Now, using stories in your presentation also really helps participants remember the key ideas behind your presentation. Separate facts or ideas alone might not be remembered well, but connecting them in a story will really help people. For example, I could share with you these separate words and ask you to try to remember them. Okay, beard, journey, mountains, gray, staff. You'd probably forget those words, but if I reminded you of Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, you'd certainly remember those words a lot more. So how can we use stories? Well, here are two ways. One way is have a central story you can open with that you can connect to each of the ideas throughout your session. Here's an example. I've done a session called 7 Evidence-Based Strategies for Deep Learning. And what I do is I open with a story about how as a very young teacher early in my career, I was preparing students for the provincial achievement exam. And, despite teaching good lessons, the students didn't retain that much and they did poorly on the exams. And it was really challenging for me as a teacher. And so in that session, when I share each of those 7 learning strategies in the session, I kind of connect it back to that story, each one of those learning strategies, and how it could have helped those students. A second strategy for using stories is to connect a smaller story to specific ideas within your session. Here's an example. In that same 7 strategies for deep learning session, the first strategy I share with participants is retrieval practice. And I tell a story about how cognitive psychologists who were studying different types of test items noticed that their control group, who was taking tests on a regular basis, were learning more. It didn't even matter what type of test it was, a quiz or jotting down answers. Just the act of taking the test helped students learn. And they later named this phenomenon retrieval practice, but it was first called the testing effect. So that's one example of how a little mini story within one idea can really help people make sense of it and also remember it. Another element of engaging participants is to help your ideas really stick with them after the session. Sadly, we tend to forget most of the things we learn in a session rather quickly, so we can find ways of enhancing their ability to recall those key ideas. So research has shown that after learning something new, we tend to forget about 70% of it within the first day. which is really quite alarming. There are ways that we can sort of interrupt this forgetting curve. And one of the ways is to get people to actively try to recall something. Okay? It's not cramming information into their minds that helps people remember something. It's actually getting them to pull it out, trying to get them to recall. So there are lots of ways that we can get our participants to try to recall. It's a good strategy for your classroom. If you do this over time, students will continue to retain and hold on to the information when they're actively recalling the key ideas. Now, we don't have several days to spread this recall over. However, there are ways that we can incorporate recall and retrieval practice, as they call it, into our sessions. Little reflection prompts from time to time, jotting things down on a graphic organizer, turning and talking to an elbow partner, exit slips, even throw in a quiz show game like a Kahoot or quizzes. Any opportunity to recall and retrieve the ideas that they've been learning, to pull those ideas out, will help deepen that retention. As mentioned a moment ago, connecting your ideas in a story narrative of some kind will also help your ideas stick in their minds. Can you remember the 5 words that we associated with Gandalf from a short time ago? Another strategy for engaging participants is to help prevent information overload. We've probably all been to those sessions. It's actually very common when you're learning new things for that information to really get overloaded in your mind. Now, research has shown that people's capacity to stay engaged and focused in a session is about 10 to 15 minutes maximum, at which point it really starts to deteriorate. Now, breaking your key session ideas into 10 to 15-minute chunks will allow your participants to reset that attention and engagement capacity. Okay? Between every 10 to 15-minute chunk, get your people to reset their attention with some sort of a mental activator. Now, by chunking your sessions into key ideas, it also results in fewer things that they have to remember. Remembering 4 or 5 key things is a lot easier than remembering 15 or 20 smaller pieces of knowledge. Now, those activator activities can be an elbow partner discussion, watching a short video clip, standing up and participating in some sort of cooperative learning activity, or having people jot down ideas on a graphic organizer. Now, the way you design your presentation materials can also greatly impact the ability for people to focus and take information in on your presentation content, okay? Now, we'll cover presentation design in another video.
In this next segment of our video, we're going to talk about grouping strategies. Grouping strategies are an important part of getting folks up and moving and learning together in a professional development session. When you plan your session, think about different ways that you can get people up and around and moving and working together. The thing about this is that sometimes adult learners will express a little bit of reluctance to get up and move from their seats, and I've been there myself. And of course, this stems from a variety of reasons. And oftentimes it stems from the fact that we're all tired and, quite frankly, don't mind sitting for a while. What we do know, though, is that learners, whether they're adults or students, benefit from collaboration, from learning from different perspectives, and from making connections with their personal and professional histories to the concepts that we're learning in our session. So when we decide to get folks up and moving in our session, it's important to explain the purpose of the strategy we're going to use so that our adult learners are clear on the why we're asking them to move from their seats. An easy grouping strategy to use involves a deck of cards. For example, you can take this deck of cards and you can distribute a card to each participant. When it's time for discussion, you can ask participants to partner up with somebody in a variety of ways. The card deck really gives you a lot of versatility when it comes to grouping. You can ask folks to find a partner in the room who has the same card suit that they do. You can ask folks in the room to partner with a person who has a card that is the same color as theirs. You might ask them to partner up with somebody who has the same number or different number than they do. Whatever works best for you, that gets folks up, moving, and connecting with one another. When I use a grouping strategy like this, I like to introduce the purpose for it before I ask people to get up and move. A purpose for a card partnering structure might sound something like this. All right, folks, in a moment, we're going to be using the cards that we have to find a partner to have a conversation with about this topic on the screen. The reason we're getting up and moving today is to inject a little bit of energizing physical movement, and more importantly, though, to hear a different perspective from somebody else in the room who we might not normally had a chance to connect with during our hour. So when I introduce my activity using words like that, my participants are clear on the why we're using a card deck to get up, move, and talk to someone else. Another quick grouping strategy is to use index cards or pieces of paper that are different colors. Here, this is just construction paper that I've cut out just kind of into index card sized pieces. And I actually keep these in a bag in my presentation kit to use whenever I need to use them. So the index cards of different colors works this way. You can give each participant an index card of a different color, and then you can ask them to, when it's time to get up and move, ask them to find a partner in the room who has an index card that is the same color as theirs. You can also create small groups of cards that are different colors. Ask participants to form a small group of 3 that includes people who all have colored cards that are different. You can imagine a variety of ways you can use colored cards to group folks together. And the nice thing about this strategy as well is that if you don't get these back at the end, it's not that big of a deal. Dice are another great way to form groupings and partners. You can see here, this is my, I carry this in my presentation kit, just this little case of a whole bunch of different dice. I personally like dice that are different colors. I was able to find at the dollar store a pack of dice that has, I don't know if you can see there, 5 different colors. So then I can use the numbers and the colors to create groupings of folks during my session. You can have folks roll the dice and find someone in the room who has the same number that they do. You can form small groups with different numbers or the same numbers. And then you can, if you have the colored dice, use the colors to form the groups of folks as well. Compass partners. This is a great grouping strategy that doesn't require any special supplies, and you can do this at the drop of a hat, really without any planning. The idea here is that you ask your participants on a scratch piece of paper or on their handout that they've received from you to write the compass directions down. So they would write north, south, east, and west. I've seen this done with seasons too. That works out really well. And the idea is at the beginning of the session, they get up, they walk around the room, and they find one partner for each compass direction. And they write their partner's name on their handout beside that direction. So I might walk up to Danny and I say, Danny, I don't have a partner for west yet. Would you like to be my west partner? And Danny says, yep, sounds good. So I'll write Danny's name beside west, and he'll write my name, Tara, beside west. And we know that whenever our session facilitator says, all right, everybody, I'd like you to stand up, find your west partner, and discuss the prompt on the screen, we know exactly who we need to go and talk to. In addition to using grouping strategies, we can also use some discussion structure protocols that help get our participants engaged with each other and with the session concepts. The benefit of using a discussion structure is that they are generally intended to balance participation amongst those folks at your session so that everybody who chooses to speak has an opportunity to do so. When we're leading a group through an activity like a discussion structure, it's important to share the purpose and intent of the activity with our participants. We know that adult learners like to know the why behind what we do in a session, especially if it involves kind of getting up from our comfortable chair if you're feeling a little bit tired. And so plan to share the why with the participants in the room. With that, sometimes if we're getting folks up and moving, it's great to let them know, hey, we're injecting a little bit of energizing physical activity and movement. We have a chance to connect with other folks in the room and see their perspective on this topic at hand, or any other rationale that you might have. Will be very useful. It will help your adult learners to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and allow participants to engage fully with the structure. Here's an example of a discussion structure that you might like to try in your own session. This activity is called Make It Rain, and on the screen you can see the steps to implementing this discussion structure with a group. So the purpose of the Make It Rain structure is to create an opportunity for participants to exchange ideas with one another. This activity can be used as an activator to introduce a concept. You can explore or brainstorm possibilities with this, or you might want to use it as a debrief or a reflection to close a topic or a session. The intent of Make It Rain is to introduce some physical movement and energy into your session. It also allows participants to explore different perspectives on the topic of the session, and that all aligns with the principles of andragogy we've discussed. So in order to do this, you would give participants a blank 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, just a regular sheet of paper. Alternately, you can give them index cards or sticky notes or any little note papers that you might have handy. Then you'll have to decide on the topic for discussion or for idea generation, and you'll have to decide how you'd like participants to form groups. Do you want them to do this at tables? Do you want them in partners? So then the process is as you see it on the screen. Ask groups to form up based on what you've decided to do. Have folks stand around the table, or if you're in a theater or lecture style room, maybe put some chairs together and to kind of form a flat surface in between folks. Have folks rip their paper into 4 to 8 pieces, and then you're going to set a timer. You decide how much time you can devote to this activity. Is it 2 minutes? Is it 3 minutes? Is it 1 minute? And before the timer goes off, you want the people standing around the table or the chairs, whatever works, to say their idea out loud, write their idea on a piece of paper, and throw it on the table. And you want to do this as many times as possible, going round and round the table over and over again. Make it rain with ideas. Say your idea, write it down, chuck it on the table. The idea is we want to cover the table with as many ideas as possible. Here's a discussion structure for encouraging your participants to connect with more than one person during a discussion. This is called the 2x4. So the purpose of this structure is to create an opportunity for participants to confirm their own understandings and extend their understanding beyond what they personally know. This activity can be used as an activator to introduce a concept. You can use it to explore or uncover multiple perspectives in the course of a discussion, or you can use it as a debrief or reflection to close out a topic. This strategy's intent is to introduce that physical movement and energy into the room, and it's to extend participant understandings of a concept so they get to speak with multiple people in the room. So the procedure is on the screen. As a facilitator, you'll have to decide what you want participants to discuss in your 2x4. You'll also have to decide how you would like the 2s and the 4s in the structure to situate. Do you want them to have standing conversations? Are you okay with folks being seated at tables? That sort of thing. And then the process is on the screen. The idea is that I get up, I circulate around the room, and I find a partner. I discuss the question that's on the screen, and we come to a consensus about the ideas that we want to share with other people. Then the two of us together as a two circulate around the room and find another partnership, another twos, to create a group of four. We share our thoughts with our partners, they share their thoughts with us, and then we're finished the structure. So it's a great opportunity for folks to get in touch with multiple people in the room. This discussion structure is a connector. It's called Round the Room and Back Again. And the purpose of the structure is to, again, encourage some energetic idea generation and to create an opportunity for participants to extend their understanding. You can use Around the Room and Back Again at any point in a workshop where it's useful to explore connections between multiple perspectives on a topic. So the intent, again, is to inject some energy into the workshop and to extend our participants' understanding of the topic that we're talking about at the time. So here you can see the instructions on the screen. Individually, we reflect and prepare a brief response to the prompt. So that means as the facilitator, you would need to decide what is our discussion prompt? What are folks going to speak about? Then once I've prepared my response to the prompt as a participant, I'll prepare a place to write and something to write with. So it could be in the corner of my handout, it could be a dedicated space on a handout you've created. Then I have 2 minutes to collect responses from as many people as possible in the room about the topic on the screen. Once that timer goes off, I usually like to put a digital timer on the screen. Once the timer goes off, I'm going to return to my table. And then as a whole group, we'll discuss what we noticed about our responses. You can also have table groups debrief around the room and back again to figure out what all the responses they collected have in common. One-word consensus is a very versatile discussion structure. You can use it with physical movement. So if you wanted folks to get up and move to speak with somebody, you could use this as well with table groups or elbow partners where folks stay seated and engage in discussion. So the purpose of one-word consensus is to create an opportunity for participants to exchange ideas with each other. And you can use this as an activator. You can use it as an exploration to uncover more perspectives on a topic you've been discussing already, or you can use it as a reflection or a debrief at the end of a topic. Now, this discussion structure aims to regroup participants in different ways, and it aims to allow folks to explore multiple perspectives on the topic. If you're using physical movement, the other intention would be to introduce kind of that energizing physical movement into the room. So you will have to prepare a prompt for this, kind of what you want folks to talk about, and you'll have to decide where you want participants to write their responses. Are they going to write them on a sticky note, an index card, or a blank space on their handout that you've given them? And here you can see the process on the screen. So participants will sit and consider your prompt, your question, or whatever it is that they're responding to that you have on the screen. Participants will create one word that captures their thoughts about the prompt. And then from there, they need a partner. So however you'd like them to form up that partnership. In their partner, they will share their word and they will listen to their partner's word. From there, they'll come to a consensus on one word to share with other people. So then next, they need to join up with another pair somehow. It could be at the table, it could be moving, it could be turning around. And from there, each partnership shares their words and they come to a consensus with one word to represent their thinking. And then from there, you can decide where to go. Would you like to debrief as a whole group? Would you like to close the activity and share some closing thoughts? It's up to you where to go once you have the one-word consensus recorded. In the past two segments, we've talked about leading groups through partnering strategies and discussion structures. And leading groups through these transitions and activities with confidence is an important skill for a PD presenter to develop. So in this section of the video, we'll talk about strategies and techniques you can use to lead transitions with confidence. An essential part of facilitating a professional development session is leading the group through transitions and activities. And it can be intimidating to lead a group of peers through transitions, especially if you notice that your group is incredibly engaged in what they're doing. It can feel at times awkward to interrupt conversations and to bring people's attention back to the group. As a facilitator, it's important for us to lead groups through activities and transitions with clarity and with confidence. And in this section of the video, we'll talk about some techniques to help with this part of PD facilitation. A fundamental understanding for anyone who leads groups of peers through processes and transitions is the notion of capture, then proceed. It's important to capture participant attention before proceeding with any discussion, any activity, information, or anything else that you have planned. If you proceed with your session before capturing everyone's attention, not only will your participants miss essential concepts and instructions and other elements of your session, but you're also setting yourself up for frustration. This approach basically boils down to the idea that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. We might be tempted to launch right into the next thing we had planned because we're conscious of time and we don't want to run out of time. But if we do that before we've captured everyone's attention, we're headed for a frustrating experience for everyone. So it's better to slow down, take the time to capture the attention of the participants in the room, and then move forward as a group. Rehearsal is a great tool for preparing to lead groups through transitions with confidence. So it's important to think through what language feels comfortable for you, the presenter, when you make specific moves in your facilitation. So I personally like to think through what it sounds like to share the purpose and instructions for an activity. It's important to plan out very thoughtfully the instructions that we would like to give to our group. It's even helpful to practice rehearsing the instructions. Say them out loud as though you're saying them to a group of participants. This can help us feel confident and prepared on the day of our session. The other thing that's helpful to think through is how you might ask your groups to bring their conversations to a close. This part can feel a little bit awkward because we're essentially interrupting our colleagues when they're talking. So think through some language that feels comfortable for you when you're doing that. For me, what I like to do is I like to apologize and acknowledge the conversations that are going on in the room. I'll wait until I've captured everyone's attention, and then I will proceed with instructions for next steps. So for me, it usually sounds something like this. Hey folks, oh gosh, I'm so sorry to interrupt these conversations. Wow, this is just incredible, incredible thoughts being shared in the room. If I can get everyone's attention here at the front for a moment. I know we could talk about this all day long, and in the interest of time, however, I think we're going to have to return back to our table groups. So folks, I'll ask you to bring your conversations to a close, head back to your tables, and prepare for a whole group debrief. So for me, that's usually what it sounds like, but for you, you may have language that feels more comfortable. The other thing to think about is what might you say if participants are reluctant to end their conversations and come back to the group. This is a great problem to have. That means you have done it right. You've got a session topic that is interesting to your participants. You've engaged them in an activity that they just don't want to end. And so think about how you might interject to ask your colleagues to bring their conversation to a close. In this case, it's so important to practice the capture, then proceed routine. Don't proceed with any instructions whatsoever until your group has focused their attention on you. However you choose to capture your participants' attention, it's important that you are clear, that you're concise, that the instructions that you give are actionable by everyone quickly, and most importantly, that your instructions and cues to capture their attention are respectful of the adult audience in the room. It's important to avoid techniques that we use with young children when we want to capture their attention so that they're looking at us, such as, how do you do it? The listening llama. There's listening llama. Don't use listening llama with adults. Although a lot of times participants in a professional development session will be amused by things like that. It's kind of like an inside joke for us teachers. There are some folks who may interpret that as being condescending. And of course, you don't want to take a chance on somebody, feeling that way about your best intentions. So use a technique that's respectful of your adult audience, be clear, concise, and actionable, and move forward as a group. Another thing that's under our control as a facilitator of a professional development session is that we can choose the tone of voice that complements the content of our session. So I'd like to introduce you to the credible voice and the relational voice. So a credible voice has an even intonation. Statements will dip down at the end of a thought, and we'll use a credible voice when we're emphasizing key points, when we're sharing research, and if we're providing instructions to a whole group. A relational voice has a more varied intonation. It rises at the end of the thought. We use a relational voice when we want to help our participants feel comfortable and when we want to encourage them to have some reflection and share their own thoughts. When we want to introduce questions we'd like our participants to consider. A relational tone is really helpful for moments where we're inviting our participants into a conversation. So we can also control our rate of speech. The rule of thumb for public speaking generally is that if you feel like you're speaking a little too slow, then you've got it just right. If you're speaking with a group of participants who might be new to this topic, managing your rate of speech is very important so that your participants don't miss important information. If you're speaking to a group of experts who are very familiar with the topic that you're discussing, you can pick up your rate of speech a little bit. Your expert participants will appreciate you kind of getting down to business. Use your emotional intelligence to read the room. Feel the room and see if, try to pick up if you need to slow down or if you need to pick up the pace. Are you needing to take a more relational approach to the way you speak to your session content, or do your participants seem to respond to a credible voice? Whatever it is, use your emotional intelligence to read the room and adapt your approach to engage your participants.